Rest.
Welcome to week 2 in Action Research Projects. In this subject, you're asked to complete a research project that'll help you in your teaching and help your school and help others that you're working with, as well as assist your students in learning. In week 1, we looked at the nature of action research and we introduced concepts such as paradigms. And in week 2, we want to go further to begin to plan the action research projects that you are seeking to complete over the next few weeks. When you draw up your plan for what you're going to do, it's often useful to begin with a full term or semester planner in which you write down all of the dates of the weeks over this semester, together with other weeks where you might be on prac or away, so that you do a 4 to 6 month planner. And on this planner, you write down other subjects you're studying, when assignments are due, and when the aspects of your research project are also going to be due, and you work out what you're going to complete each week and each month in this plan. It's also useful to write out a weekly planner where you set aside at least 10 hours a week for each subject that you're working on. And so your weekly planner would have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, other activities that you're doing. And on this planner, you would write down where you're able to find the 10 hours a week for each subject. And if you're doing 4 subjects, that's 40 hours a week that you need to find. And about half of the time, 5 out of the 10 hours would be spent going through the subject material itself, and the other half working on the assignments. After all, it's the assignments that you're going to be graded on. In week 2, we want to revisit briefly the idea of paradigms, such as the objective quantitative paradigm, where we see things and measure things, and we know what's there because it can be seen and measured. It's evidence-based. And then there are the more complex subjective paradigms, in that what we claim to see and measure is not so certain because it's shaped by culture and language and a lot of things that are less able to be seen. And when we do qualitative research, such as an interview, then we are able to more fully understand the subjective qualitative aspects of the research that we're undertaking. And in reality, we want both. We want to be able to observe and measure, describe what we can see happening, and then we also want to reflect more deeply on the ways in which culture and language and other qualities and qualitative concepts are able to shape what we see and understand. In this second week, we want you to reflect briefly on your personal paradigms for teaching and learning. How do you view what is taking place, and how does this compare with the diversity of 25 to 30 students who come from different cultures and backgrounds who may see things differently? What are their paradigms? What are your paradigms? How do they match up? And how do you work with differences that might be present so that everyone is valued and given opportunity and is listened to? We also want to begin to identify some interesting areas, particularly in the subjects of English and mathematics, that you can explore in your project. And if there are other areas of specialisation like art and music, we want to think how this can be related to the primary tasks of English and maths teaching, and how you could implement an action that would improve English and maths. We also want you to begin to think about ethics application. That is, if you're going to be interviewing students, engaging with students, you need to complete a 1-page ethics application sheet, and on this sheet you need to describe what you were doing and describe the ways in which you're ensuring this is ethical, and ensuring that there are strategies to help students who may struggle for various reasons. So let's begin in week 2 to develop an overview of what we're going to set out to do, and also how we're going to do it. In beginning this class, it's worth watching the video on action research by Dr. Andy Johnson, which you can find on the Moodle website, and take some notes on the action research projects that you could do that involve English or mathematics that would involve the insights that you gain from this video and other material that we provide on what action research involves. Remember, action research involves an action that seeks to better understand our actions as teachers and in the classroom among students and with parents and schools. It's a powerful tool describing the action that we carry out, the ways in which we evaluate it, see how successful it is, and then revisit our actions and seek to come up with better actions that could be more effective in education. It focuses on asking questions about what is going on rather than rushing into thinking that we have all the answers. It's evidence-based. That is, it seeks to observe and describe what takes place rather than simply assume what is happening. It involves new actions, new ways of teaching English or mathematics and then observing how effective they are. It involves observing, measuring, having control groups whereby we might divide the class into two and one half of the class might follow a certain action, the other class follow a different action, and then we swap over. So there's equity, and then we compare the results with the first group that's introduced to the new action initially, and then the second group as it's introduced to the new action. Action research is grounded in theory, and so it's important to begin your action research project with a literature review in which you seek to better understand the theories of education, mathematics teaching, English teaching, in order to be more fully informed about the actions that you're seeking to be involved with. There are a number of levels at which you can carry out this action research project. At the basic level, you could simply prepare an action research project and you might not have the time or the resources to carry it out. And that would be fine. So if you develop a high quality action research project, if you do high quality literature review and describe what you could do, then that is very gradable and that is doable. A more medium level action research project could start to interview some teachers and ask them, what do they do? What do they find effective? And in a short time frame of a few days, you can interview a number of teachers and you can gather information from them on what they have found to be effective. This is not based so much on your actions, but on observing and describing the actions of other fellow teachers, and that would be effective, providing it also engages with strong scholarly literature from the literature review and some analysis of what the teachers say. At a medium level, you might collect various forms of data, such as the student's work, and then you would analyse this data, and that would take a few weeks. And then you might need to have a more developed ethics approval sheet in order to ensure that this is fully caring, helpful, and that no one's disadvantaged. On a more advanced level, you would need to complete a slightly longer ethics approval process in that you could be conducting interviews with students that could take many weeks. And in these interviews, you need to ensure that you are safeguarding all that the students are doing to ensure that it's ethical. So if we go to the video by Dr. Andy Johnson, you'll see there that there is listed a number of steps in the action research project, and that it's worth looking at these steps in the action research project. The first step is think about a question, a problem, a topic area that you could investigate. And in each of your classes, I'm sure there are areas of language and English that we're interested in, and you could be in prep, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or in high school, where you're thinking about a new way of teaching that involves language, English in some way, and you're interested in raising questions about how effective this will be. What's a question that you could ask? Or in mathematics, in prep, or year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or high school, you could be also asking questions about how we could teach the mathematics topic area more fully. I encourage you in week 2 to write down 3, 4, or 5 or more different possible topics and to think through which ones are going to be most doable, most useful, most valuable, most interesting to you to carry out over the next few weeks. And remember, we're not just after answers to this one question that we're going to settle on and ask, we're after developing methods and models that we can apply each year of our teaching in order to be more effective teachers. Next, I want you to think about a plan that you could follow in order to collect data about this English or maths approach or action that you're going to implement. How would you gather data? By observing, or by interviewing other teachers, or by setting a task, or dividing the class in two and setting one task for half the class and a different approach for the other half of the class, and comparing the different methods and then swapping over so that both halves of the class are exposed to the same approach eventually? And how would you gather data there? And your school may already be carrying out approaches that would provide data, and you could use data that's being gathered by your school already. And then, most importantly, in the second half of this project, the first half of the project and your first assignment that's due 2,000 words describes the method that you're going to use. And it includes the literature review of the area that you're going to be investigating. And then in the second half, you take this 2,000 words that you've got, you can rework that further, and then you take the data that you collect and you begin to analyze the data. And then you've got 8,000 words, which includes your literature review, your method, data, and if it's a proposal and it doesn't go further, you could stop at that point. But if you're able to carry it out, gather the data, you analyze it further and organize the data further, and you could draw graphs and conclusions and make recommendations based on the data that you have gathered, and suggest areas that could be improved and developed further, and create further plans for actions and ways of reporting your findings further. And if your material is very good, you might want to think about publishing it in an educational journal or a scholarly journal. And I welcome you to get in touch with me or other lecturers and to discuss the ways in which you could publish your material in scholarly or educational journals. And that would be very useful as well. So in the second stage, week 2, we ask you to give thought to questions that you could ask about English and mathematics and ways in which you could investigate these in various ways in the next few weeks of this term and semester in order to become more effective in your teaching. And then we ask you to write that up both as a 2,000-word proposal, which is due in as your first assignment, and then to develop this further through the remainder of the semester and to write that up as your final 8,000 words project, in which we encourage you to begin to experiment with discovering new insights into the areas that you're teaching and ways of evaluating and examining them. And then you'll be able to develop skills that you'll be able to carry on into your teaching in years to come. In planning your research, we begin by reviewing the literature. And in chapter 3 of Spencer Clark and Susan Porath's book on action research, you'll be able to look at the approaches to literature review that you'll be able to use more effectively. And you can go to Moodle and locate this resource by Spencer Clark and Susan Perath on Action Research there. And there's the web address as well that you'll be able to read through. So firstly, you want to think about what we mean by an action research project, and I encourage you to write up a paragraph or more to include in your proposal and your final assignment on what is action research. That is, it is taking an action that's going to improve teaching and education in particular areas such as maths and English, and then it is measuring, because it's research, it's measuring how effective that action is, and then it's analysing how effective that action is. And it's also relating this action to the other scholarly literature that's been gathered by other scholars. So the starting point is usually the gathering of relevant scholarly literature in the areas that you are looking at. So if you was to type in action research in English, you would see that there are examples of action research at the University of South Australia. And so you could go there to the University of South Australia example. And there are other examples as well that you could find just using a Google search. And so here's an example of action research in English language teaching developed at University of South Australia. That is, you take an action, you then diagnose how well things are going and you respond. For example, you might find that certain tests are used, or oral assessments are used, and observations take place. You might find that there's various hypotheses that you work with. So there's some examples that you can find just by doing a Google search. Even better than Google search, I encourage, is using of Google Scholar. So if you type in scholar.google.com and do a search on Google Scholar, you'll see over here on the right-hand side, there are a number of resources on action research in primary school English. And if you click on Cite, C-I-T-E, you've got the references there, and you can go Control-C, make a copy of that, go over to your Word document, Control-P, paste that into your Word document, and you're able to read through these different approaches to action research in English. And so there's a number of examples here, so you could choose one of those. Here's one on promoting confidence in spoken English. And so you could, if you were wanting to focus on that, you could see an example here of an extensive research project of about 80,000 words on a research project on building confidence in spoken English. And notice that it begins with an extensive literature review where they look at all the ways in which people are able to learn about being confident in speaking English. So using Google Scholar, you're able to locate a number of resources that way. Similarly with mathematics, if you put into Google Scholar examples of action research in education primary school mathematics, you can identify a number of examples of action research projects, and you could model your action research project on some of the other action research projects that people have followed out. And notice these usually begin with literature review, that is a review of other scholarly literature in the area that's being investigated. It's important that you take care not to feel overwhelmed by the depth of analysis that some are following in their action research projects. That is, each one of us will work at our own pace, at our own level, and all of us are able to complete action research projects according to our abilities and skills and levels. We need to be careful that we don't measure ourselves against others who've had a lot more experience, who will be able to do a lot more than we could. So the literature review process begins as the anchor for our inquiry. That is, as we are looking for new knowledge, we're dependent on past knowledge that's already been gained. And this literature that we find about the topic that we're looking at helps us to be informed about the topic itself, to be more informed about what we're going to focus on, to be informed on the research questions that we could be asking, and to more finely tune the research questions so that they can be more effective. By investigating the area we're looking at further, we can develop methodologies which show the ways in which we could carry out our research and we could gather data. And the review of the literature also helps us to assess whether our findings are going to relate to other studies that have been carried out already. In beginning the literature review, it's worth thinking about what topic you were most interested in. And so within English and maths, what's an area within those topics that you were particularly interested in? Writing, reading, development of language. What's the areas you're interested in? What do you know about the topics that you're interested in already? What do you not know, and where could you gather more information on this? And how could the research address the gap between what is known and what is not yet known, particularly in your class and school setting that you'll be working in? So with the literature review, you'll be gathering information, and you should think about what information is most recent as opposed to information that comes from lots of years ago. What information is most relevant to your content areas, the areas that you'll be teaching, and particularly maths and English, because we're seeking to focus on those. What's most appropriate to your grade level? What's most appropriate to areas which you are most interested in, that is high ability, low ability, those who are struggling for various reasons, those who might have maths anxiety or reading anxiety, and what are the reasons for this? And where would you find the literature? And I think the College Library and Google Scholar are two excellent sources of resources. And also, what are the policies that we have, and what are the policies that your schools have? Some of the policies, that is, we need to be careful to avoid plagiarism. If we were going to use artificial intelligence, we need to recognise that that is now measurable. So when you submit your assignments, we'll be able to see whether you've used AI, and so all the wording would need to be changed if you were to submit it, otherwise you wouldn't pass. But you could use it as a way of just finding out a bit more about the topic, but not submitting the wording that you gather that way. And then with the policies, what are the policies that your school has? What's the curriculum areas that they are working in and they value? And then there's theoretical literatures. That is, what are the theories that undergird the ways in which we teach, the ways in which we teach maths, the ways in which we teach English? And if you can quote one or more theoreticians, that will be useful as well. How applicable? What's the practical application of what you do? And there are literatures out there on practical application. You'll also need to think about literatures that describe methodologies, such as observation, such as interviews. And you can have primary sources, that is, what's your school policy, what's a government policy, or you can have secondary resources, which are books with editors where the materials have been processed in some way. And then there's tertiary resources, which are encyclopedias that are more processed material further. When using the internet, you need to be careful that the material that you gather on the internet is of a high quality. That is, you should always be able to identify the author, the date, the author's background, and also you always want material in which references have been used by the author, and at the end of their resource, if you've only got 1 or 2 references, it's not so scholarly. If you've got no references, even worse. But if you've got 10, 15 or more scholarly resources and references by the author, and they're a well-recognised author, then you know it's more likely to be a scholarly material. So remember, when using material from the internet or books, you need to evaluate what's the quality of the material, how reliable is this material. You then need to organise your literature review around the major topic, but also the subtopic areas that you'll be looking into, and also other related subtopics such as what is the nature of action research, what's the methodology that you will be using, what analysis will you be conducting, and what areas and sub-areas of the topic will you be looking at. What's the content of the research, what's the context of the research, and how reliable is it? So for each of the resources that you find in your literature review, remember you need to note the author, the title, the date, and other details. And then you also need to note the major points from the literature that you gather. And we don't expect you to read a whole book or a lengthy article. Often, if you read a few pages, you're able to identify the major points, and you're able to then rewrite these in your own words, and you're able to then describe the way in which the author, such as Clark and Porrath 2016, found that, and then you describe in your own words what they found. Remember, it's important to identify significant themes that emerge from significant relevant literatures. It's important to introduce the major concepts that you're going to be looking at and be able to show the ways in which you understand and are able to engage with these concepts more fully. Remember, all of this is designed to help make you more effective as teachers, our schools more effective, and our material that we used more evidence-based and reliable, rather than just assumed to be working as well as we can. So I look forward to meeting you each in week 2, and then week 4, week 6, week 8, week 10 and week 12, as we begin to prepare assignment 1, which is the proposal of 2,000 words, and then at the conclusion of this subject, the 8,000 word final project there. And this is able to be at a basic level where you're proposing what you're doing and then you're gathering the literature, or if you're able to, and as long as you complete the ethics page as well, and submit that to me, and then I'll forward on to make sure that you are carefully following ethical approaches, then you're able to conduct some interviews, observations, other ways of gathering data about the actions that you take in order to show that they're more effective. I look forward to working with you in each of these over the weeks to come. Thank you. Dr. Sam Hay.
Thank you.